This unbelievable story comes from the other side of the world, yet it's still close enough to home. Just imagine being trapped beneath the rubble after a devastating earthquake for 17 long days without food, water, or even sunlight. And not only surviving, but also staying conscious the entire time. At first glance, this seems impossible, something that could never happen. Yet it did happen. It happened to a teenage girl who goes by the name Reshma Begum. At just 19 years old, Reshma was already working as a garment worker in Bangladesh, trying to make an honest living. But the world would soon change in a moment. On April 2013, a major earthquake hit the country, causing widespread destruction and collapsing buildings all around it. One of these buildings was Rana Plaza, an 8-story structure that housed several garment factories where many people, like Rizma, lost their lives. As the building crumbled to pieces, Resma found herself trapped beneath the rubble. Chaos, screams, dust. Then everything went silent. Over 1,100 people had lost their lives, including Resma's mother. But amazingly, Resma was still alive. The incident left a huge hole in the city, and the whole country was in mourning. Most people assumed that all those trapped inside the rubble had died. Rescuers began searching for survivors, but within a few hours, they realized it was too late. With each passing hour, their hopes of finding anyone alive diminished. By day 2, most had given up. But amidst all this devastation, there was one small crack, a tiny air pocket that miraculously allowed Reshma to breathe and stay alive. However, there was a lot of concrete and twisted metal lying above her, and she was completely surrounded by darkness. All she could hear were the sounds of heavy machinery and the screams of those who had lost their loved ones. This must have been terrifying, but what truly amazed everyone was what happened next. Despite being crushed beneath so much weight, Rahima was still conscious and feeling pain. To be honest, it's a miracle she wasn't crushed into a pancake, but somehow she managed to stay alive. However, she quickly realized that the air pocket she was in didn't have any light, food, or water. It was basically a tomb, except it wasn't. After all, she was still breathing. But then the hunger started to kick in, and although it took a while, eventually the thirst did too. Luckily, some water was dripping down through the rubble, probably from melted ice in the upper floors. Somehow this water sustained her, allowing her to survive for another day. It's hard to imagine how difficult it must have been for her, trapped in total darkness with nothing to do but think about the life that had been so cruelly taken away from her. After a few days, though, her mind started playing tricks on her. To keep herself sane, she started talking to herself. But her inner strength kept her going, and she refused to give up. Amazingly, she survived on just water dripping from the rubble for almost 2 weeks. By day 17, the search and rescue operation had mostly wrapped up, and all hope of finding any more survivors had faded away. In fact, no one even remembered that Rahima was still trapped inside. Then suddenly, a miracle happened. A rescuer heard a faint sound coming from the rubble. He couldn't believe his ears. Could it be a survivor? Immediately, he called for backup, and together they started digging through the unstable rubble. They don't know how long they worked for, but it must have been at least several hours. Finally, they reached her. They grabbed her hand and pulled her out to safety. She was covered in dust from head to toe, but she was alive. The news of her survival spread like wildfire, and soon the entire country was celebrating. Doctors were astonished to find that she hadn't died from dehydration. They said that according to science, she should have passed away within 3 days, yet she managed to defy the odds and live for 17 days. Her will to live must have been stronger than anything else. We don't know exactly how she managed to survive for so long, but doctors believe it might have been because of her age. They said that younger people usually have a better chance of survival in such situations compared to adults. Reshma was taken to the hospital where she received treatment for her injuries. The doctors did everything they could to help her recover as quickly as possible. In an interview after the incident, Reshma spoke about her experience and said she was lucky to be alive. She talked about how she never gave up hope and always believed that someone would come to save her. She also mentioned that she wasn't scared of death and was instead more concerned about how difficult it would be for her family to accept her body after her death. She said, quote, "I don't feel scared of death. I think it's more painful for my parents than for me. I thought if I die, they will be too heartbroken." It's incredible to think that she remained so calm and level-headed throughout such a terrifying ordeal. Doctors were amazed by her condition when they pulled her out of the rubble since she didn't seem traumatized at all. She later explained that she tried to stay strong and positive because she didn't want to worry her family. What a brave young lady she is. After spending several weeks in the hospital, she was finally discharged and returned home. Upon hearing her story, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh visited her house and presented her with a cash reward of 100,000 taka. Additionally, she received free medical care and lifetime employment in the garment industry. Reshma's miraculous survival made global headlines. People were stunned by her incredible will to live and her strength to endure such a traumatic event. She became a symbol of hope, courage, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. Many people doubted that she would survive the ordeal, but against all odds, she did. Her story touched the hearts of people all over the world and inspired them to stay positive in difficult situations. Before we wrap up this story, I want to share a few thoughts. Life can be unpredictable, and sometimes it seems like everything is against us. But it's important to remember that no matter how difficult things get, we should never give up. As humans, we are incredibly resilient and capable of overcoming even the greatest obstacles. Reshma's story is a testament to this fact. She faced unimaginable challenges, but her determination and refusal to give up ultimately led to her survival. It's also worth noting that Reshma's story isn't unique. There are countless other stories of people who have survived against all odds. These stories remind us that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope for a brighter future. So if you're facing your own struggles, remember to stay positive and keep fighting. You never know what the future may hold, and miracles do happen. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll be sharing your own story of survival with the world. In this heartbreaking story, an Australian tourist named Laura Maja had only been on holiday in the beautiful tropical paradise of Annawatuna, Sri Lanka for 3 days when the ocean did something strange, something it had never done before and would never do again. And she survived by climbing onto the roof of a nearby building. But how? Well, let's begin at the beginning. It was December 26, 2004. Laura, then 28, was spending the Boxing Day morning with her 31-year-old fiancé Sajua, who was a Sri Lankan national. They were getting ready to set out on a boat to go snorkeling, a trip they had been looking forward to for weeks. When Laura came down the stairs of their bungalow, she noticed that the usually busy beach was unusually empty. But this didn't worry her. It was a weekday, after all, and most tourists were still sleeping off their hangovers from the night before. The sky was a brilliant blue, not a cloud in sight. The sun was shining, and there wasn't a leaf or a branch to be seen moving in the gentle breeze. Everything was calm, peaceful even. She and Sajua walked down to the shore, hand in hand, and gazed out at the deep blue water. There wasn't a hint of the maelstrom that was forming over the horizon. The waves lapped gently at the sand, inviting them in for a swim. There was nothing in the environment that hinted at any danger. There were no warning signs about a potential tsunami. So when the couple decided to head back to the bungalow to grab their snorkeling gear, they weren't acting out of any kind of fear. In fact, they seemed carefree, happy even, eager to spend the day doing what they loved best, swimming in the warm ocean. But within seconds of returning to their bungalow, Laura noticed something odd. The ocean had retreated a long way. She could see rocks that were normally covered by water, and she could walk much further out into the sea than she ever had before. This was strange, she thought, but not necessarily dangerous. Sometimes the ocean does that, she said to herself. When the ocean recedes, the local kids take it as an invitation to play in the shallows, build sandcastles, or search for small crabs and fish hiding in the wet sand. Laura and Sujit, too, couldn't resist the allure of the receding ocean. So they, too, waded into the shallows, happily picking up seashells and enjoying the warm water on their skin. The receding water made the beach almost theirs alone. Laura and Sajua wandered on, blissfully unaware of the impending doom bearing down on them. Just a few hundred meters away, a monstrous wave was forming, a wall of water over 30 meters high, containing incredible destructive power, hurtling towards them at speeds of over 800 kilometers per hour. Within minutes, the wave would be upon them, and there wouldn't be a single soul on the beach to witness its awfulness. Because just as Laura and Sajua strolled along the shoreline, reveling in the gift the ocean had given them, other tourists began trickling back to the beach. Some were solo travelers, others couples. Some were families with young children. All were excited to have a day of fun in the sun. And if they had stayed in their bungalows, they might have had that day. But the ocean doesn't give second chances, and those who returned to the shore that day wouldn't live to tell the tale. Back on the bungalow, Laura and Sujit had decided to postpone their snorkeling trip until the next day. They needed to buy some more supplies, they said to themselves, or maybe it was time to get a massage or just relax by the pool. But whatever it was, they decided not to go to the beach, at least not yet. It was then that they noticed something odd, a huge wave pulling itself closer and closer to the land. At first, they thought nothing of it. After all, the ocean does what it wants. But as they continued watching, realization dawned on them. This wasn't a normal wave. This was something unnatural, something extraordinary. The wave grew larger and larger, and it became clear to them that it was headed straight for them. Laura and Sujiwa looked at each other, fear dawning on their faces. Whatever was happening, they needed to get out of there fast. Without saying a word, they took off running, racing across the beach as fast as they could. Behind them, the wave picked up speed, crashing into the shore with terrifying force. People screamed in terror as they ran for higher ground. Others dove for cover, desperately trying to shield themselves from the onslaught of water that was about to wash over them. When the wave hit, it was like nothing anyone there had ever experienced before. Buildings were swept away, trees were uprooted, boats were tossed around like toys. Cars were thrown into the air and landed hundreds of meters away. People were flung into the air and carried by the raging water. It was utter chaos. For Laura and Sujiwa, it must have seemed like the end of the world. Thankfully, they managed to scramble up the stairs of a nearby shop and onto a balcony on the first floor. They clung to each other, terrified as the wave crashed over the shop, tossing them around like rubber duckies. When the water finally receded, they found themselves surrounded by debris, but they were alive. And then the shaking began. The building they were standing on was starting to collapse. With the legs swept out from under it by the floodwater, Laura and Sujiwa panicked. They needed to get out of there fast, but the water was rising fast, too. Soon it would be too deep to wade in. But the thought of being trapped inside the collapsing building was even scarier. In a moment of desperation, Laura jumped. She dove into the churning floodwaters, hoping she could make it to higher ground before the water level rose. The current was strong, but she managed to keep her head above the water and make some progress. Then the water hit her legs, and she realized she was in trouble. Something large and heavy smashed into her shins. It knocked the breath out of her lungs and spun her around in the water. She struggled to keep her balance, but the water was too strong. She went underwater and was dragged along the seabed. She hit rocks, tree trunks, and other debris. Each impact knocked the stuffing out of her, but she refused to give up. She knew that if she stopped, she would drown. Suddenly, she saw a light in the distance and began swimming towards it. With renewed vigor, she surged forward, desperate to reach solid ground. She could feel the end of the wave coming. If she could just make it to the surface, she would be okay. Then her feet touched bottom. She gasped, kicking wildly, propelling herself upward. She broke through the surface and found herself near a two-story building. On the roof stood a group of locals waving and shouting. They had seen her struggling in the water and were eager to help. They reached out and grabbed her by the hair, hauling her up onto the roof. Then they did something unexpected. Instead of congratulating her or asking if she was hurt, they stared at her for a long moment without saying a word. It was Laura who finally broke the silence. She looked at her rescuers and asked, "Does this happen often?" And that was when they told her, "No." As the hours passed, the water began to recede once more. When it reached waist level, Laura and another tourist who had also made it to the roof climbed down and waded to safety. By now, the beach was unrecognizable. Boats, homes, and bodies littered the sand. Debris from the destroyed buildings was strewn everywhere. The water was murky and filled with oil and other contaminants. The air was thick with the stench of death and destruction. As Laura stumbled out of the water, she saw a group of men carrying a body away. It was Sujit's. She watched as they carried him away, his lifeless eyes staring vacantly into the distance. Laura never forgot Sujiwa, and the grief and trauma of that day haunted her for years. But she also felt immense gratitude for surviving such a terrible tragedy. She was one of the lucky ones. In total, the tsunami claimed over 227,000 lives in 14 countries. But thanks to the quick thinking of those strangers on the roof, Laura was able to add her story to the many tales of survival that emerged in the aftermath of the disaster. What do you think of this amazing story? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any new stories.